Well, we begin today's podcast with some news that was kind of heartbreaking, to say the least. Sacred Heart has postponed the first 4 games of the season against AIC, 2 against Army, and one against Quinnipiac, as there's been a small number of cases throughout the SHU hockey team and through subsequent contact tracing. But without further ado, we are very excited to have on our next guest on the podcast, and that's sophomore goalie Luke Lush. Luke, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thanks. How are you doing?
Good. So let's start off with a basic question. And how did you get into hockey? And I know goalie is a very tough position. You got to face shots that come at you very fast. How did you get into hockey? And most importantly, how did you get into becoming a goaltender?
Well, being from Alberta, it was kind of common for guys my age, growing up to be thrown into hockey. So it wasn't much of a question there. I was also lucky enough where my dad and my grandpa and one of my uncles as well have been goalies. And so I think it's kind of a tip of the cap that I've kind of wanted to grow up to be a little bit like them. And so it's kind of what got me strapped in the pads.
So bouncing off of that, what stuck out to you about Sacred Heart's hockey program when you were looking to play D1?
Well, the interest is one thing. It's always nice to be wanted. And I was lucky enough to be introduced to Scott. He came down and watched a couple of my games, and they'd shown interest as well. And so after speaking to them a little bit and, looking into the school, seeing that obviously we have a new rink coming in a couple of years, like that's a big attractive piece for an incoming recruit, as well as seeing the team's continued improvement from year to year. They seem to be climbing and becoming more and more of a bigger Division I school. So that was pretty attractive to me coming in.
Luke, I know you said you're from Alberta, and I'm not too familiar with the Canadian geographic, but does that mean that you're a Calgary Flame fan? Or, what are some of the teams in Alberta, and did you have a favorite team growing up?
I kind of lived all over Alberta. I've lived in a handful of cities, and as of right now, my hometown is actually just outside of Edmonton. So most people there are Oilers fans, and myself, I can't really relate to that. I'm actually a huge Devils fan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
My dad and I were both big Broder River fans growing up. So, that's kind of who I've been cheering for. So it's funny enough that I'm actually so much closer to Jersey here now.
A Devils fan from all the way from Alberta. I mean, You don't see those.
No, I'm actually from New Jersey. I'm there right now, but I'm a Red Wings fan, so not much going on for me.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I haven't had anything going on either the last few years either, so I can't really say much.
Yeah, so you mentioned Marty Brodeur. Was there any other specific player, maybe even not a goalie, that you admired growing up?
Yeah, for sure. It was mostly goalies. Myself, I became a goalie at a pretty young age. But on the Devils, I was a big Parise fan for a while until he left to Mini. And then I was also a big Patrick Elias fan as well. And then in my younger years, I liked Niedermeyer as well as Stevens.
We had Mark Johnstone on just a couple of podcasts ago, and he's from New Jersey, and he's a Devils fan. And he said the player that his favorite growing up was Patrick Elias, which is why he was number 26. Do you talk with John Soda about the Devils a lot, or not really?
Yeah, it's actually one of the very few things we agree on. Usually, we like to butt heads quite a bit. So whenever that subject gets brought up, it's one of the few times I can be on his side with something. So yeah, we chat about it here and there a little bit.
So I want to talk about your mentality as a goalie real quick. Like Will said earlier, being a hockey goalie is difficult enough. What's the mentality as a goalie, and especially at the D1 level? What's going through your mind?
Hopefully, honestly, ideally, nothing's going through my mind. I'm just kind of what people refer to as being in the zone, or I like to think of it as being in the moment, like in the here and now. And so when I'm at my best, there's not a whole lot going on up top. I'm just kind of reacting and letting my all my hours and years of training kind of take over.
Luke, I don't know if you remember this, but since we're talking about playing Division I goalie, in limited action last year, you made your first ever start and you got your first ever shutout. And right after that game, I interviewed you on camera, and I asked you how it felt to get your first ever win in your first ever game, let alone your first ever shutout. Looking back on that, now a year later, how does that feel? How did that sink in, and how does that sink in now?
Obviously, it felt good. It can't get much better than that. For me, actually, in that time period, I had a lot of personal, stressors going on outside of the rink for me. And it was actually not the best time of my life. And so to be able to have that kind of escape in hockey and see those types of results, gave me a little more affirmation, and gave me a little bit of silver lining in my life that period. Honestly, if I can it's something I may not have shared with many people, but the game prior to that, just a few days before when we were at AIC in Springfield, I actually got to play just the third period in that game, and wasn't really tested. I had, I think, 6 or 7 shots, if that, but managed to keep them all out. And that game itself, actually, if anything, might have meant more to me. It had been, months since I'd seen any game action, and so that one there felt a little good to me, just to be able to get in and kind of get my feet back in there. And then obviously the game afterwards, like I wasn't really tested either against Niagara, but I felt strong with my performance, and I was lucky enough to pick up a couple of assists too, so that's always fun. Yeah.
I've always wondered.
Last thing, sorry, the game against Niagara I kind of kept it quiet too, but it happened to be my birthday as well, so.
Oh, there you go.
It was nice to spend that in the crease instead of on the bench.
You said I want to let Jack ask another question, but you said that you got a couple assists to go with your first ever game.
Yeah.
It's been a crazy year, as you know. I don't know if Niagara pulled their goalie at the end of the game. If they did, were you thinking you're going to shoot the puck to score a goal?
We were up by 6, so it wasn't really much of a question.
See, I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's something that I always dream of doing, especially being a Brodeur fan. Like, he's got the NHL record for most goals as a goalie with 3, I believe. And so, yeah, it's something I dream of doing. I tried it once in junior, and it actually kind of backfired and ended up in my net instead. And so I haven't had the chance since, but I hope that comes soon enough and that it goes a bit better for me this time.
So I've always wondered, I played hockey growing up, and we've had 2 to 3 goalies on our team almost every year in club. When the coach calls over to you on the bench and says you're going in, and like it seems like sometimes it'll catch you off guard. Like, what's going through your mind? What do you do to prepare to go in? I know you said earlier that you're just kind of empty up top. Is it the same thing, like right as you're about to go in, or do you ever maybe even overthink the situation?
Not necessarily. There might be some times where nerves kind of, you might feel a little bit physically, and that's normal for anyone to feel. But, in a lot of instances, like when you're getting put in there, it's whether it's your starting goalie being injured or, your team just not doing too well. Like, you're essentially, there's not a lot of blood on your hands per se. Like, you're going into an already pretty messy situation usually. So you don't have much to lose really, which is kind of a nice and freeing feeling. It's either, the game stays as it is, or, you might come in and get to play the hero. So it's not something I usually typically worry about. If anything, my biggest worry would be that when coach looks over me, I'm not snacking or anything on the bench. So yeah, honestly, that's probably the biggest worry.
What is your relationship like with the other goalies, between Josh Benson and between Tolomedo? What's your relationship between the two of them? Obviously, you've had to say goodbye to Drennan Atherton from last year. What's the relationship like?
I get along with him really well, actually. Benson's one of my neighbors here. He's a really great guy. I find I relate to him a little bit more than some of the other guys on the team, with him being from Minnesota. It's a little more similar to what people are like back home for me. So I kind of see that in him, and I've always related to that. And I got along really well with Drennan as well last year. And as well, I get along really well with David this year too. We're all kind of, goalies. It's hard to appreciate what a goalie goes through unless you have done it yourself. And so I think it's nice to have those people you can kind of confide in on the team, and that can really understand what you're going through as well, because it's not always the same for what the players are going through.
So moving on from hockey real quick, over quarantine, I feel like everyone had their own little guilty pleasure. What was yours? What did you do to stay busy?
Probably walk my dog. That was when I first got home. Alberta isn't really known for having the best weather, and so I think for the first month and a half or 2 months when I was back home, we still had quite a bit of snow, and it was below freezing temperatures, and so it was the only thing that I liked, or I would leave the house for the first few weeks. And so yeah, it's mostly that, or really just getting outside to walk my dog and enjoy some fresh air.
You mentioned Alberta is not the best weather-wise. What's it like in the summertime? I mean, I don't know how it is for you guys, but back in March, I came back home to Long Island right when the school sent us back to quarantine, when the whole pandemic began. And we have, pretty normal weather up here. Summertime reaches the 90s. What was like the off-season like for you? I mean, is there like pools up there? I mean, is it warm enough up there to go swimming and all that? Because like I said, I have no idea what it's like.
It's There's just really like in the summer it's quite nice actually, and so there's more just of a huge variance really. So we go by Celsius. So in the summer, we'll get temperatures 85, 90 degrees on good days, and we have a nice summer. It just starts a little later typically. It doesn't really start getting that nice out until middle to late May, and then it already starts getting chilly again in September. Like I know right there, they've had snow for probably at least a month now, and I think they were at negative 20 degrees Celsius. I don't really know the conversion there to Fahrenheit. That's probably, I think, about 7 or 8 degrees Fahrenheit. Or sorry, that's more so, sorry, that's closer to 30. It's a little lower than 30. Yeah, I don't know. But it's not great in the winter, but in the summer it's definitely nice, especially if you go to a nice area like Banff or something in the mountains. I made a few trips like that. I also made a few trips to British Columbia, mostly in the Penticton area. I've got some friends that live there. That's a beautiful area if you ever want to look it up. It's really worth checking out. Really hot there as well. That gets to more like the 90, 95, 100 degree temperature. Yeah.
Did you come down to the States a lot playing growing up before college?
No. I don't think I actually ever played in the States once before coming to college. Had a bunch of tournaments within Western Canada, and that was about it. It's a pretty big hockey hotbed out there, right? Like it's our number one sport. It's definitely ahead of football, baseball, basketball, and so you never have to look that far for competition.
Being from Alberta and you not coming to the States to play hockey until college, do you know all the states here in America?
I do actually. We kind of mess around here sometimes. So in our house we have Braden Tuck, who's also a fellow Albertan,
Yep.
And we also have Jeppe Europe, who's from Denmark. And we always kind of mess around with ourselves, saying how we understand American geography maybe a little bit better than a lot of Americans do. Or at least significantly better than most Americans understand Canadian geography. And we have far fewer provinces than you guys have states. And it's funny, we'll try to quiz some of the boys sometimes on how many provinces there are or how many they can name. And it's nice just to give us a little chuckle here and there.
Did you know like all the states before coming to the States?
Yeah.
Okay. So because some people that I talk to that are not from Connecticut and are not from the country, they go, I never knew Connecticut ever existed. Because if you look at a map, Connecticut is like buried all the way on the East Coast.
Yeah, that is true. I knew of all the states. I maybe couldn't have pointed them all out on a map before coming here. But I knew of all of them. I didn't know much about Connecticut, I'll tell you that, aside that it was in the Northeast. But yeah, I'd still visited the States before, not necessarily for hockey. Like I got the chance to actually watch Broder's jersey retirement with my dad around my 18th birthday. A handful of years ago, and so we were staying in New York City. Got to watch a couple games, so I had a decent idea of the area. But yeah, I kind of knew things, but yeah, I think I had a pretty good idea for what the States was like, and all the places. So,
talking about the NHL real quick, they're looking at a January 1st start, from what I last heard.
Mm-hmm.
But there's rumors about the Canadian teams and how this is just a rumor I heard. I don't think this is going to be official, or if it may have come from an official source, I'm not sure. I honestly forget where I heard it. But I heard a rumor that the Canadian teams might only play each other. And what's your thoughts on that? Like, do you think that would just kind of let them tear into each other? Or?
It kind of makes sense because, like, with the border situation, I know for myself, I can't go home until May because of the whole quarantine situation. If I go home, I'm supposed to quarantine for 2 weeks. And if I come back, I'm supposed to quarantine for 2 weeks. There's a month right there gone. And given our schedule and how it's going to be a little condensed, right, that's a lot of time to miss. And so, yeah, I don't think it's kind of hard for them to work around that as well. And you even see that with the NHL, there were still issues about players getting into the bubbles, both being on the Canadian border side. And so it would make a lot of sense. It's maybe not what the league wants, but given the current situation, they have to be flexible with a lot of things.
When you talk about what you do playing hockey with Sacred Heart, what you do off the ice, walk us through an average day for Luke Lush, waking up on game day and getting ready to go to the game. What's an average day like for Luke Lush?
Well, like everyone else, I get out of bed, put my pants on one leg at a time. I try to stay in the habit, just try to be productive in the morning, keep my phone away from my bed, so it forces me to get out of bed at the first time the alarm goes off. make my bed, just kind of get started. I like to keep things light on game day. It's a little bit different depending if I'm at home or on the road. So I'm pretty flexible with a lot of things. I try not to be too uptight, like goalies are stereotypically are. And so the big things for me are, I guess, that are staples is I try to eat as much as I can. I've got a pretty big appetite, and so I want to make sure that I've got as much of my stomach as I can for the end of the game, so I don't run out of gas. I'm big into meditation, and so one of the last things I do before we depart for the rink is I have this little guided meditation I do real quickly. I do that, have a quick cold shower, kind of wakes me up a little bit since I don't drink coffee, and then just kind of head to the rink, hang out with the guys, keep things light, play a bit of sewer ball. And then I like to get dressed pretty late, and that kind of stresses the guys out a little bit. So last thing I do is I just go up in the stands, tape my stick, say a little prayer, and then come down to the dressing room with, 7-8 minutes left before warm-ups and throw my stuff on quick and head out there. But yeah, nothing too crazy, or at least nothing too crazy that I would share with anyone in particular.
Do you have any of those quirky superstitions, like your left pad goes on first every time or anything like that?
I wouldn't even necessarily care. I don't like to consider them superstitions at this point, because if say for whatever reason it just doesn't happen, or I don't do it, I'm not going to stress about it, right? Like a lot of people, it's not like a must for me, but it's something in my routine evolves from year to year, right? So it's different than it was 3 years ago, but it's pretty down pat and muscle memory now, where I do pretty much the exact same thing every time without realizing it. I don't know if you guys would have seen it. There was a cool clip of Henrik Lundqvist during warm-ups during these playoffs, just this past spring and summer, where they videoed him. They compared it from one game to the next game, and it looked absolutely identical, right, for 2 minutes straight. And so, you could probably do something similar to that to me, and it would look pretty close to the same. And that's just because it's basically become muscle memory at this point. I'm just on autopilot running through all that stuff.
What I want to ask you is kind of become like a coach to our listeners and viewers, because you hear them talk about all the time on TV. The hardest thing for a goalie to do is stop a deflection. But I want to ask you, as a goalie, and you're taking shots in practice in a game, is the hardest thing to stop is a deflection, and why?
Oh, well, I was hoping I could maybe ask you the question you'd have an answer, because I still haven't quite figured it out either. It's definitely difficult. It's not something you can totally prepare for, because if the puck doesn't get deflected, then you still got to make the save, right? And it probably looks worse if you don't stop the save if it's not deflected. It's a big thing, at least for myself. I know I was blessed enough to have a big frame. I'm pretty tall, and thankfully modern goalie gear helps fill me out so I don't look too thin. And so it's a matter of just kind of putting myself in the best position to make the save if it does get deflected, right? A lot of times prior to that, maybe it's just a communication thing. If you can talk to your defenseman as the puck goes up to the point it's coming through, if you can talk, get him to tie up sticks, right, then you don't have to worry about it at all, and that's probably the easiest save to make. But yeah, and then if it does get deflected, hopefully you're in a good enough position where you still get a piece of it. If not, hopefully you can react quick enough to, get something behind it.
Who's got the most difficult shot to stop on the team?
I'm going to answer with no one, because I don't want to give anyone that value.
It's a good answer.
Yeah. So.
Luke, I remember when I came down to film practice before the quarantine hit, you came up to me and you said, "Do not post anything that I'm scored on," because there was a nice video of I forget who shot it, but they went bar down, and you turn around and look at the camera, and it's on Instagram. To go back and you just shake your head like.
Really?
And,
yeah, I don't remember that, but I remember mentioning that to you. I just don't need any bad press. I hope that did make it on Instagram.
Well, it did. I mean, it's about a month old right now. So.
Okay.
I'm gonna take the blame for that. That was on me.
Okay. I haven't been on Insta in a few months now, so I thankfully haven't seen it. Otherwise, it'd be your guys' ass.
Going back to stopping shots, and you're defending like a power play, and you always got to watch out for the one-timer. Is how difficult is it to get over, from one side of the crease to the other to stop that one-timer? And is it just is it luck? Because you never know where the one-timer's going. They could go top shelf, they could go 5-hole. How do you react to something like that?
It's just being aware, having your head on a swivel and being aware of the play in front of you. And a lot of times, our team's pretty good for doing pre-scouting throughout the week. We kind of have an idea of what our opponents are going to do, and we have PK meetings, and so we have an idea of what they're going to be looking for. And so you already have that in the back of your mind. You get your head on a swivel, and you see their options while they're on the power play. And on plays that go across, really, if you're prepared, you shouldn't be in a position where it's too hard to get across. And then hopefully, most of goaltending is positioning. And so if you're in a good position, it makes it a lot easier on yourself. Honestly, if anything, power play in practice last year was more difficult than in games. Obviously, didn't see a lot of minutes, but because we had to face guys like Austin McElmurray and Vito Bavaro on the off wing there, taking huge bombs, and it was either going to the back of the net or it was hurting. So
even with all that gear on, I mean,
yeah.
I want to follow up with this question. Is there any part of a goalie's equipment that you don't want to get, shot in that, will sting? I know a lot of goalies say the mask because if it hits you in the mask, it'll sting you. But aside from that, is there one specific part of the body where you don't want to make the save with?
Yeah, well, like between your thighs isn't too great either. Usually, like that still hurts a little bit. I know Heights, you'll get a kick out of this, and so will Maddie actually more than anyone. Is I'm pretty particular about my chest protector. I'm pretty flexible with everything else, but I'm very particular about my chest protector. And the one I started the season with last year had very soft arms, and I was being a pretty big crybaby about it because I was leaving practice every day with a couple new bruises, and so I ended up kind of doctoring it up and making some modifications to it and switching out the arms. And I've actually done the same thing this year to the one I got. I wasn't a huge fan of it either, and so I've made a few changes and kind of built one up to, so I'm feeling less of the shots. But yeah, you definitely still do feel a lot of shots. I'm lucky enough where I usually don't take too many off the mask, whether that's just because I dodge them or I'm tall enough where guys are hopefully usually shooting there. But yeah, it's there's a lot of spots where it still hurts.
So you wouldn't tell us who had the most difficult shot, but heading into the locker room, who's the biggest, I guess you could say, class clown in the locker room?
There's a few guys that come to mind. This year's been a bit difficult because we haven't been able to be in the locker room all at once with all the guys, and so it's hard to judge everybody together. There's a few guys, like last season, for example, Vito was a big guy that could get everyone laughing and whatnot. So same with Mike Lee. And as for this year, I think Derek Contessa might have that role. All the guys seem to be able to get a joke, or sorry, more of a laugh, whether it's out of him or at him. There's a few other guys like Marcel Godbout. He's a really funny guy too. Johnson gets the guys going sometimes, but yeah, I don't think there's one clear-cut winner this year in that, but there's a few guys that chip in.
I want to go back to last year, which was the highlight of my year because it's been a very gruesome year, and that was a Connecticut Ice tournament. And I'm sure you're aware of this, but Mike Richter was actually there for maybe both, or I know one of the games. Did you have a conversation with him, from goalie to goalie, or did you kind of just go about your day as a regular basis?
You know what? Until you mentioned that, I almost forgot that he was there. Maybe that's just because he's a Rangers fan, or a old Ranger, and I'm a Devils fan, so it didn't really stick to me. But he is obviously, I think he's in the Hall of Fame. I'm pretty sure as a goalie.
Yep.
He's very good. We got the top college goalie award named after him, and he's quite the figure. But no, we didn't get the chance to really see him or chat with him. It would have been nice to maybe pick his brain a little bit and ask a few questions, but I didn't get that chance.
Walk us through that moment where you guys were declared CTI champions.
It was pretty cool. I don't really have much of like the mental monologue with me anymore of that. It was just kind of being able to experience the moment. It was pretty cool because we had a decent lead. And right before that, my roommate at the last year, Braden Tuck, managed to score that empty net goal to kind of seal the deal. And so that there was kind of where we really started to get excited. We kind of had it in the bag almost. And so there was a lot of cool anticipation and excitement building up there. And then it was just cool to share that with all my teammates. And then it was nice enough that the dean of the business college at Sacred Heart last year gave us the day off the following, that Monday, the next day. And so we managed to enjoy ourselves that night too.
Did you know that Rod Brindamore was actually in attendance for both of those games?
I did not know. He wasn't on our bench, so I couldn't have told you that.
Well, because his son, I don't know if he still plays, but he played for Quinnipiac last year.
That's right. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I probably made the connection, but I didn't really think of whether Rob was in the stands or not.
So describe your relationship with the coaches real quick, especially last year when you had limited time, you were on the bench a lot. Do you think you had a different kind of relationship with, say, CJ and Scott than you may have, or I mean, than other players may have?
Yeah, I guess for sure. I mean, as a goalie, it's a bit different too, where the coaches aren't necessarily the most knowledgeable when it comes to position, and that's that's pretty standard and normal across the board when it comes to coaches. And so they put a lot of their trust in Craig Height with that stuff, being our goalie coach. And so I definitely had a more of a day-to-day working relationship with Craig than I did with any other coaches. But I'm a huge fan of our coaching staff here, whether last year between CJ, Scott, and Paul. They're all really good to me, and they're still good for keeping me honest and pushing me to be my best. But yeah, they're all great for that. And then this year as well, like with the addition of Steve and with Paul's departure, I really enjoyed my time with him so far too, and he's been good for kind of taking over that role with all the video and systems, and he's been good for trying to ask everybody, including the goalies, for our input with these systems and how to incorporate ourselves into that. So I've been a big fan of it. I can't ask for much more with the coaches. They do their job quite well, and so I just try to keep up my end of the deal.
Well, Luke, we really appreciate you coming on the show. We had a lot of laughs. To be quite honest, I don't expect much from college hockey players. They kind of want to get what they got to get done, go to the rink, and come back. But you were great, and we really appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet. Anytime. All right. Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you, Luke.
Bye.
Well, that was Luke Lush, goaltender, great guy. A lot of fun to do that interview.
Yeah, he was great, and he made us, laugh at a lot of things, and it was kind of good to have that one-on-one conversation with him. What's it like in the life of a, college hockey player? So he had a lot of important information. But like we said at the top of the show, we're going to close with this statement that our opening game scheduled for Saturday, November 21st, has been postponed against AIC. The Army series scheduled for November 27th and November 28th has also been postponed because of an Army COVID minor outbreak on Army's campus. And because of our situation, we have also postponed November 24th at Quinnipiac. So as of right now, our tentative start date to start the season is Tuesday, December 1st at American International in Springfield, Massachusetts. That will change, so keep an eye on our social media platforms to get more of the breaking stories. Jackie, if you have nothing else to say, we can sign off.
I'm good. Thanks for tuning in. Go Pios. Stay safe. We'll see you next week.